Welcome to Yes Also. I'm Susie Barrett. My guest today is the consummate comedy director, Dave Buckman. Many of you know Dave as the co-owner and executive producer of Coldtowne Theater in Austin, but his improv journey started in Chicago with Second City, I.O., and The Annoyance. Dave has directed extensively for the Second City and also spent a couple of years in Amsterdam as artistic director of Boom Chicago. There were so many stones for us to turn over in this conversation. We really get into nuts and bolts of directing and producing, things like making a successful running order and bringing out the best in a cast. And this is just one half of our conversation. To listen to part 2, go to yesalso.supercast.com, become a subscriber, and you'll suddenly get magical access to all of the content that the real fans are listening to. One more quick announcement. Dave would like everyone to know that the submissions are open for the Austin Sketch Fest. They're especially looking for submissions from places that aren't New York, LA, and Chicago. So if that sounds like you, go to atxsketchfest.com and submit. Okay, and with that, I take you to Dave Buckman. Oh my goodness, Dave Buckman, welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan.
Yeah. I mean, big fan of yours in general, big fan of every phase of our friendship. I feel like we braid together through life phases and locations, but we always pick up from where we left off somehow.
You are my sister from another mother. That
doesn't rhyme.
Didn't rhyme, but
yeah.
Sentiment's still the same.
You are my brother from another mister. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start with how you came into improv and comedy? Do you want to start with where you are now and work backwards?
I don't know. I don't know.
Let's start. Let's do an overview like of the beginning of your journey, because you kind of you grew up at a time when improv was not as ubiquitous as it is now.
No.
Yeah, walk us through that.
Yeah, I think I stumbled onto the Marx Brothers in 4th grade, and something opened up inside me. Like, I think I kind of came online watching the first 20 minutes of Animal Crackers at a friend's birthday party, and I was obsessed immediately. And then all of my heroes growing up, Robin Williams and Jonathan Winters and Mork and Mindy, or Aykroyd, or Gilda, or Jane Curtin, or Jan Hooks, or Phil Hartman, they all had improv in their background. I'd look them up, and they'd either be from the Groundlings or this magical place called Second City. And more often than not, the people I gravitated towards were from Second City. So, but even like obscure character actors, like Fred Willard or Don Lake or, Joan Rivers, Robert Klein, or this guy, I remember Hamilton Camp, who played Ralph Furley's brother on Three's Company. And I was like, who's that guy? He's hysterical. And I looked him up in Second City, and I'm like, what is it with this place? So
I have to pause here and just say there's something of a director and producer's DNA in that child, that from a young age, you're pointing out just some random obscure, not the lead character, you're noticing some random guy and going, who's that? He's funny.
Yes.
He's got it.
Yes.
know?
For sure. Yeah. And so I knew growing up, I didn't know what Second City was or what they did there. I just knew that I had to go there someday because that's where all my heroes came from. So I kind of fell into improv itself in high school. I made a film with some friends that was mostly improvised mockumentary.
Was that inspired by Spinal Tap or something else?
A little bit. I don't think it was directly related from Spinal Tap. It was just what we thought was funny, and we created like a 60 minutes parody improvised, and we wrote some commercial parodies, and it was like a senior project that we did. And then I kind of put it down, and then I took a class. I went to school in DC at American University, and I used to scour the Washington Post to audition ads because I knew I wanted to be acting somehow. I just didn't know how to break in. And so one day there was a ad for a workshop in Falls Church with Michael Gelman from the Second City. And Michael Gelman, those you don't know, used to be Bill Murray's understudy back in the day. And I drove an hour and a half in a snowstorm to go take this workshop. And I'll never forget, he, at one point during I had never seen improv. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't understand what I was supposed to be doing in that class. But one time in that class, Michael took an improv glass, an imaginary glass of water that he used in a scene. And then while he was debriefing, walked over across the room 20 or 30 feet to put it down on an actual table, this invisible glass. And again, something opened up inside me. And I said, oh, he really thought there was a glass there. And I think something clicked that day.
Just
So it's
to
like a comedy.
clarify,
Yeah.
he was improvising a scene with
Yeah.
an object work glass, but then
Yeah.
after the scene was over, while he
He
was
was still
talking
holding
about the
it.
scene, yes. So he
Still holding
as
it, and he had the notion I should put this glass down while I'm
yeah.
talking to these people. I'm done with the glass. I can leave. I can put the glass down. But I think in Michael's brain, in his brain, like did not let him think it was an imaginary glass for a second. I don't know if it was on purpose or if it was subconsciously, but something in that moment clicked with me about I get it now. I understand what this is. What this is,
We are
and I
committing
took
so hard that we believe
yes,
it's real, and therefore the audience does too.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I keep
And
cutting you off.
that's okay. I took a you didn't cut me off. I took a comedy sports class with a buddy of mine who was also interested in comedy. We went down to Roslyn, Virginia, took a 8 week comedy sports class. I saw a show, and then I took all those games and I taught them to the cast of the play I was in. I was in a play called The Nerd, which is one of the funniest scripts I'd ever read. And I was Karen Garachi and I were playing husband and wife in this play.
You guys went to college together?
She was my first comedy partner. We
I
started
had no
this improv
idea.
troupe together, and that whole cast became this improv troupe on campus. So yeah, Garachi and she was my first improv buddy.
I had no
Uh,
idea. She's like near the top of my list for this. Obviously an old buddy from Chicago from when I
yeah,
was, yeah, doing IO stuff. Yeah, she's the best. I can't believe I never knew that about you guys. That's great.
yeah.
S
We showed up in Chicago together. Oh, I beat her by a couple months, but the plan was to go together.
So you show up to your play rehearsal and you're like, let's learn these short
Yep.
form games. And then out of that sprung like a short form college improv troupe.
Exactly. Yeah. And we did shows all that summer for incoming freshman orientation, and we did a dorm
Mm-hmm.
tour. And by the time the school year rolled around, everybody, at least the freshmen, thought we were a thing when we hadn't been. So we had Thursday nights at 10 locked down for a couple years of this troupe. And like Chris Wilde, who was the comic book store guy on Young Sheldon, was in that troupe. And
Oh,
Dan Shackner, he's been the Puppy Bowl referee for the last 20 years. He was in that troupe.
you've all made something of
It's
yourselves.
it's unreal. It's
Yeah,
unreal how we
that's
all met.
cool.
Yeah,
I have to ask, what was your name?
you're not going to believe it. We were Mission Improbable before Mission Improbable was Mission Improbable.
No kidding.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And I'm assuming you're embroiled in a deep lawsuit with them to.
No, they took it and ran with it. It's theirs now. They
Yeah.
own it.
That's wild.
Hmm.
Okay, so by this point, are you angling towards an absolute career in comedy, or was this something you were doing as a passion on the side?
On the side, I was working on campus. I'd graduated. I was running this improv troupe. I was that guy who
Mm-hmm.
graduated and still hanging out with college kids, not knowing what I was doing. And then one day I was going through a bad breakup, and I was doing a short form show for a bunch of frat guys. And just like, there's got to be something more than this, right? Than this, because it feels like it's too easy now. Because short form just got too easy. And I had Second City came to DC, a touring company show, came to DC at Lisner Auditorium on George Washington campus. And in that show, I saw Tina Fey, Polar, Bill Cott, Ali Farnakian,
Jeez.
Rachel Hamilton, and I want to say Pat McCartney or Mike McCarthy. One of those. Sorry.
It was
Um,
Paul McCartney.
yeah.
Yeah, don't be humble. You saw Paul McCartney in a
And
Second City
I'd
tour.
never seen a Second City show, and I didn't know what I was looking at. But halfway through the second act, they did a montage, long form, about the government shutdown. Like Newt Gingrich was shutting down the government on Clinton, if you can imagine how long ago that was.
Yeah.
Um, And it blew my mind what they did. I was like, I got it, whatever that is. And then the Second City. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm going to Second City.
Yeah,
So
it's resurrecting this old echo from your research as a kid, too. It's
yeah,
like, oh, right, this is the place my people
this is what I
went.
was exactly.
Yeah,
So I got myself together and got everything in a van and moved out to Chicago.
amazing.
Yeah.
When you landed in Chicago, like what was the process there? Shrink the
Oh my
timeline for
God.
me, but what was the summary? Like, how long did it take for you to start doing stuff and get making traction?
My first week in Chicago, I dropped all my stuff off and then drove in a van. No, drove in a car with Chris Wilde down to Austin, Texas for a festival. It was my last show with my college troupe as I was moving to Chicago, basically. It was fascinating to see so many other improv people from around the country and meet so many people. And I went back to Chicago, saw an ad in the Reader, Second City need hosts. And I was working as a host at Second City the next week.
Hmm.
And I met Ike my first night, and my life has changed from that moment on.
So Ike Barinholtz, who then
Yeah.
became your roommate, right? Was that
And my best man and my roommate in two different continents. Yeah.
yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
You met Ike because he was also working at Second City, or was he like
Yes. He
okay?
was also, he knew, I asked him where I could get some weed, and they pointed me to Ike.
He
Ike was
reached into
working
his
in the,
butt crack and pulled out a sock full full of six
uh,
different drugs.
Ike was working in the kitchen because he wasn't allowed to work on the floor anymore. Uh,
Wait, what's that story?
I don't know. It was before I got there, but I know he had
Okay.
been relegated to the kitchen by that point. But we hung out that night, and it was just like, oh my God, we connect on so many different levels. And then, yeah, we ended up rooming together.
Yeah.
But at Second City, I really found my place because in by Christmas, this was like in May, and by Christmas, I had keys to the building.
Wow.
I was a night manager. They bumped me up to assistant manager and then night manager. So I was doing waitress checkouts while I was still in classes.
You got
Uh,
keys, and by then Ike had been relegated to the dumpster in the alley behind.
Ike was off doing Lindbergh babies and Del Close's classes. He was very good at. He was very big time at IO.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I did classes at Second City. I did classes at Annoyance.
Hmm.
Waited a little bit. I waited until Karen got to Chicago to jump in IO with her.
Mm.
Um, and then we were, yeah, Backadall was in that group, and Zach Thompson and the People of Earth guys were all in that class. Yeah,
Amazing. Like
yeah.
Ryan Archibald and yeah,
Pardo
Andy
and
St. Clair and
yep, all those
yeah.
guys.
So between the three schools, so you did the programs at Second City, Annoyance, and IO then
Yeah,
eventually. Yeah.
pretty close together. Yeah,
What
I
are
still owe Sharna for level 5 and level 6.
she owes you? She owes you for emotional and mental trauma. Um, it comes out in the wash. If
Right.
you're to look at the orchard of all of that education,
Hmm.
what are the apples you pluck from each of those trees?
Well, at Second City classes, I had Norm Holly from my level 6 class. I met Rachel Miller, my first day of class at Second City, and Ed Goodman and Scott Goldstein, and I was doing the running order for our level 6. Norm Holly actually seated the running order selection to me so I really was gravitating towards organizing and figuring out the flow and all that
Hmm.
stuff. And eventually, when I got to AD, teach there, and AD for Mick really taught me a lot about running order and protecting material from the audience, and sketch is what you learn at Second City.
Yeah.
At Annoyance, Mick was my North Star, is still my North Star. Now it's more Jen. Mick and Jen have been my North Stars, mentors forever. At the Annoyance, I was on a troupe with Sudeikis and Dana and Julia and Ed Goodman called
Wow.
New Hair. And it was literally about saying anything you wanted and feeling you were going to be unconditionally validated no matter what you chose. Dana and Julia would fall into a scene, roll around on the floor on top of each other, screaming, "We're in somebody's house, we're in somebody's house." At least once a show, they would do that into initiation. Uh, and then, it's like, what are you going to do with that? what are you gonna do with that? Do something. Don't just stare at them and like laugh, like engage with what they're giving you. So there's really kind
Mm.
of like feet to the fire with that class. Sudeikis too is very devilish in his initiations too. And
Do you
then
remember any standout Sudeikis initiations?
I'll tell you the first time I knew Jason was well, Jason was on every single cage match team playing against each himself for several weeks in a row. And when somebody is that popular, they're going to be famous. When that's not
Mm.
happening in somebody at your theater, that person is definitely going to be famous. I remember seeing Jason in an Annoyance class once, calmly while he's engaging with he's owner of a pet store. He walks over. He's just talking to somebody about nothing. He walks over to a cage, unlocks a, a cage, pulls out a puppy by its head, twists its neck, and throws it on the floor, and never stops the conversation about something else completely. I'm like, who does that in a scene that's so nonchalantly and so like as if it was like the most normal thing in the world of that character?
Right,
And
as
I,
if he was
God,
sprinkling fish food in a fish
yes,
tank.
yes,
He's
exactly.
killing a puppy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, that's beyond my capabilities. That's that guy's amazing.
Right. Yeah, and beyond your imagination of psychopathy.
Yeah,
Like it's like,
yeah.
oh, he can access characters that the rest of us don't have the
Yeah.
darkness to achieve.
I'd be so like in my head about like doing the thing and getting so like in at that point in my career, I just I wouldn't be capable of doing three different things like that at once.
Well, and there's that great exercise. I feel like they used to teach it at IO, and I feel
Hmm.
like for a while they taught it at UCB, and I'm not sure if it still exists in any curriculum, but it's just that simple exercise, talk about something else. So they
Yeah,
give you an activity like you're both washing a car, but you can't say anything to do with washing the car. You have to
I
have
love
a
those
different
exercises.
they're great. And talk about a great fundamental if you compare improv to basketball and it's like sometimes you got to just go back to like defense position and sliding along the floor or like chest
Yeah,
passes like that's one of those fundamental skills that you can just practice where it's like oh right no shop talk we can be in a bank and we don't ever have to talk about money and later I would see that pop up in movies like Pulp Fiction. The
hmm,
the assassins are like cleaning their guns but talking about McDonald's, and it's like, oh yeah, what a win. We can talk about literally anything else, and it's so much more interesting and tells us. Now we learn two things about these characters. We know that they're like cold-blooded assassins and we know that that's so casual to them that they can bicker about Big Macs and stuff, but
yeah,
that Sudeikis move is one of those where it's like that is the maximum level of talk about something else to the point where
yes,
you're like killing a puppy and you're not addressing it.
unreal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love that.
and then at IO, I think I got told what not to do more than I got told what to do.
Mm.
I mean, Susan was a revelation. Susan was my level three class teacher
Susan
there. Susan
Messing.
Messing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I can remember Noah yelling at me. We heard that already, like when I would repeat myself in a scene.
uh
Or I had Dell for 2 weeks before he died. And I had, these are the two things I got from Dell. One is don't yawn when he's talking. Check. Noted. Got it. Thank you.
Also,
And the
how
other one,
dare he in his like heroin slump.
right.
Like I
And then
guess
the
at
other
that
one
point he
was
wasn't, but yeah.
don't wear white socks on stage. And to this day, I do not. But
Wow.
it's too
Too
distracting.
distracting.
Yep.
Boy, he would have a fucking field day with what the kids are doing now. The
Right.
people wearing hats on stage, you wouldn't believe it, Dave.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. But yeah, interesting. And other than that, did you have any sort of impressions of Dell or his? I mean, by that point he was in his literal sunset, but
Yeah. For sure.
there were no other like impressions of his like
That's
improv
all.
knowledge or anything.
It was 2 weeks of him kind of rambling. No one really did get to do many scenes. I think there's only a couple scenes in those 2 weeks. Um, but no, I didn't really get
Yeah,
too much out of it. It was, he was a presence my entire time taking classes there. It was, stumbling in and out, but to finally get him. But no, yeah,
yeah.
I got,
Um,
we ended up getting Noah in
it,
the replacement.
Interesting that IO taught you your summary of that it taught you more what not to do than what to
Hmm.
do. Where did you learn what to do? Was that more that annoyance feet to the fire thing? Second City, it sounds like, was giving you more of a directorial education than
Yeah,
a
I don't.
performance one.
Yeah, I think I got. I don't think I got good at improv until I actually got to Austin. Honestly, I
Wow.
I was not that good. I remember I would go through slumps, and I didn't. I don't think I really understood comedy as much as I do now. But it really took this troupe I was in at Austin, the Frank Mills, with my wife Rachel and another couple, Bob McNichol and Erica May, that really kind of like got what I was supposed to be doing this whole time.
And
Um,
this is
but
just to paint a picture for the audience. Your time in Austin came after years in Chicago, then years at Boom Chicago
yeah,
and Amsterdam, then directing Second City shows, and then a move to
yeah.
Austin, and then yeah. So this is
I was on
decades
a really
deep.
good troupe. I was on a really good troupe at IO called Pontius Pilate. Randall Har was in that troupe,
Mm,
and he was a revelation for me. Like I was he was Mick and I was Keith in my mind because I felt like it was my band and his. He was the showman, and so I've always been like the worker bee in whatever group I'm in. I'm always gravitate towards administrative and leadership and all that stuff, giving notes and kind of cleaning up the show, seeing what the show needs. But as far as like those big moves, I've only had a couple of those times when I can look back and say, "Wow, that was I closed the show. I nailed the button." When I have a button, it's my favorite thing in the world. When I when I know I have the line, and I know the lights are going to go out as soon as I say this line. I'm just sitting on it, and I just know it's going to happen, and then I say it,
uh-huh.
and the lights go out. There's no better drug. And I've lived in Amsterdam. There's no better drug than that.
Give me an example of one of your buttons. I know you remember one or two of them.
Oh, it so blends together. I remember this one in IO where I think I was kind of like being gravitated towards closing the show as Elvis with a song. And I was like so nervous about it because it's just not my wheelhouse to be the center of attention like that. And nail it. I knew I could do Elvis, but singing in front of an audience scared the fuck out of me. And
Hmm.
closing the show, like having to do the big finish. And I remember nailing it and landing it and walking off stage, like floating off stage.
Hmm.
And Lutz was right there in the hallway as I was coming off stage. And he just grabbed me and said, just hold on to that. Hold on. What are you feeling right now? Hold on to that for a
Oh,
long time. As long as you can, hold on to that. Feel that.
that's so
It was
sweet.
very sweet, yeah.
Uh, and that how long do you feel like that buzz lasted?
I still feel that. That's the buzz I'm still trying to chase. That's the dragon.
Yeah,
You know what I
that
mean?
yeah,
I can
that's
still
that.
feel it. I
Wow.
still feel the lights at IO hitting my eyes and not really being able to like it. Just I could still see the blur of the audience in that.
Mm,
And when I close my eyes and think about that moment,
wow.
you know.
Wow. The day that Keith Richards got to be Mick Jagger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's since you brought it up organically, let's talk about the
Mm.
Frank Mills
Okay.
and what you mean by that's when you finally became a good improviser.
Yeah.
What was it? What was the difference?
I remember being in Chicago and realize and feeling like there's got to be something like I was feeling in DC. There was something I was feeling in Chicago by the end of my run there, thinking that like there's got to be something more than this. What looks like a sketch show. You know what I mean? It's improvised, but it looks like a sketch show, and that's what all Harold's looked like at the time. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's just a bunch of scenes, and there wasn't anything deeper beyond this the B line, the C line, the first, second, third beat of what we were doing. It was just all of, and I just like there's something. This is such a powerful tool. There's got to be something deeper than this to this art. And what Erica and Rachel and I found, and eventually with Mike Jastrow and Todd Schonbacher, who lived with us for a little bit, uh, was a realness. Just like we would do mono scenes, 25, 35 minute scenes as real people, um, and forcing us to slow down and still have ridiculous choices, but taking them seriously. And because the characters themselves take their life seriously. For instance, I remember a scene where Erica just threw away the line, God, it smells like a fart factory in here. And the next scene later, Bob is trying to get me a temporary job. I can't get a job anywhere. And he's like, he's finally found me a job. And I know he's already thinking fart factory. And I'm like, just sitting like, I know he's going to pitch me the fart factory um, job. But we're going to build it up for a little bit right here and like really go into the feeling of, I need this job. You don't understand. It's like, hey, you don't have to take this job. I don't want to talk down to you. And really having that friendship connection moment, even though we know we're about to hit Fart Factory around the corner.
Right. Right.
And really slowing it down and milking, because I don't think the audience didn't know it was coming, but we both did.
Right, of course
Um,
not. They're picturing a steel mill or something,
exactly.
which is
Yeah, we're setting that
exactly
up
the map
beautifully.
over. Yeah.
And then we hit Fart Factory, but we stay where we are. We don't really like go crazy with it. We just were like, my grandfather worked in a fart factory. He got fired. He got, there's union troubles, all that stuff. So we go back into and all that stuff. And we go back. Rachel plays my grandfather at the fart factory in
Uh-huh.
1918. And so, but we're playing it as good of acting as we could possibly do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that to me transcended what I was doing in Chicago and even at Boom. Um, to be more, I don't want to say theatrical, but more real,
Mm.
more engaging, more impactful.
It's almost like being smaller instead of bigger. The
Hmm.
connection is in the silence and the eye contact and the patience and the
The
trust.
patience. That's what I learned.
Yeah. I love that. It's the
The
frustrating
silences.
the silences. The frustrating thing about learning patience or practicing patient play is everybody on the team has to also be engaged in that. Like if
Yeah.
there's one person trying to play patiently, which I have tried, you don't get to speak.
No.
You don't get to
No.
be in the scene.
But
Um
if you're in a
yeah,
small enough group that understands that that's what we're doing, that's what we're kind of going
yes.
for, then it's the most beautiful thing in the world. And those silences are such golden reflective times. That's what happens in a normal conversation. So the audience
Totally.
is filling in their own thoughts there. And if we don't pause and let people think, the audience has no room to laugh. You know what I mean? It's
Totally.
it's a conversation between the performers and the audience needs that room to laugh.
Well, and those are the times where the moments where they are also connecting with these characters
Hmm.
and falling in love with their plight or their
Yeah,
love or whatever. So it's just like film and TV. If it was all the action scene, you wouldn't give a shit. You have to also know
right.
why the guy is looking for his daughter or whatever, you know. I
And if
think
you
that's what
are
action
sitting up
movies are
there,
about.
if you're sitting up there and you're thinking like, how can I make this funnier? You're already in the way of the funny. You're in
Hmm.
between the audience and the funny by just thinking about how do I make this funnier instead of how do I make this more real?
Yeah.
Uh, You know,
Yeah.
we're
And
funny
then
people. It's gonna be funny. We're funny
right,
people. I don't have to
right.
worry. I just trust that I am.
Well, and also unfunny people are funny. Like unfunny people say things that make me laugh all the time because
Yep.
it's like the truth of their character or whatever. They're not trying to be funny. The things I overhear in airports or whatever, it's like, oh my God, that guy is so playing his
Oh my
character
god.
game, you know?
Yeah.
And it's yeah, but they're not a funny person or yeah, so that's not even a necessary ingredient. But you're right. We can trust more that funny will happen, that
Yeah.
ideas will occur, that yeah. How do you hedge against personally, like when you're in a show like Frank Mills and you're having these long scenes? Did you ever find yourself swatting away the invention Muppet that's trying to
Mm.
like be like, ooh, maybe I'll make this the move or the connection. Do you
You
have to
learn to
kind of
sit on
swat
them.
that?
You
Okay.
learn to sit on them and collect them and pull
Mm,
out the ones that fit the moment. You just it gets easier to put things in your back pocket and know what's back there, instead of having to insert it in there. I mean, just kind of wait for it to hit organically, and kind of lead us there. I mean, it's like what you're telling level 1 students in like a word at a time circle. It's like you can't plan for, you can plan, but it's not going to make sense once by the time it's your turn to talk, right?
Right. When it comes to you, you have to just say the word that makes sense for the sentence.
No matter how much pre-planning you thought about it. So yeah, it really taught me about being in the moment and staying in the moment and turning off the chatter brain in my head while someone else is talking. That was a big thing to get over. And I still feel like that's one of the biggest things that people don't know how to do when they show up in improv is turn that inner monologue off when someone else is talking.
Yeah. And how do you do that other than practice and attention? And yeah. Are you someone who meditates?
No, not as much as I should.
Uh,
I can. Here's what I can do. I can get myself really focused and still and quiet right before a show. It's usually when I do my meditating is maybe the 3 or 4 minutes before I walk on stage. I can get real quiet and centered and focused and really just listen, get attuned to my breathing and get myself just like centered before I walk out there and engage with an audience. So that's really where I do my meditating, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, as you were saying, like to quiet the inner monologue, that the crossover to meditation just rang in my brain a little bit. I also don't do it as much as I should, but it's that skill of like being able to have chatter run by on a different plane and just kind of ignore it while you stay present and focused, I think is and curious and sexy and funny. Because that's what you should be projecting at all times on stage. I'm gonna sprinkle in here some listener questions. Our subscribers are they're able to become our close friends on Instagram, and then we let them know ahead of time who our interview is going to be, so that they can direct questions directly. And there's several questions for you.
People have heard of me.
Yes. Yeah. So these are like tailored to you. This one's from Francis. Can you explain how to construct a good show aimed at people who are new to improv?
How to construct a new show aimed at people who are new to improv.
Yeah, a good show aimed at people who are new to improv. So I'm assuming the audience is new to improv, and what are you doing to bring them a good show and kind of teach them improv?
I learned from Mick. Mick is a genius at this. Mick Napier over at the Annoyance. Taking care of the audience, promising them something and delivering on that promise. That's also, you learn that from Boom, working at Boom too.
Yeah.
You make a promise to the audience, you follow up on that promise.
When you say make a promise, does that come in the intro to the show? Does that come on the poster? What are you? What's the promise?
Everything.
Yeah.
The poster's a promise. The title's a promise. The immediate instructions when we open the show as a promise. The premise of a sketch is a promise. The bringing up of any object in the scene, in an improv scene, is a promise that you promise to deliver on. Getting a suggestion is a promise. We're going to use this suggestion. So the audience really needs that. They need complete context and clarification about what they're going to see and what they're going to experience beforehand. All of comedy is an inside joke. So in order for us all to laugh, we all have to be on the we all have to be in on it and what we're about to experience and see, and all have the same context for us to be able to laugh at the same thing. So just providing the context of like, hey, you're here on an improv night. We're gonna see 3 improv troupes, and each of them are gonna take a suggestion from you at the top of their show, and then you just sit back and relax, and we'll take it from there. And you're gonna laugh harder than you've laughed in a long time. Sound good?
Yeah.
That's my promise. Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And I'm going to deliver on that promise. That's a promise I can deliver on. I'm not going to make a promise I can't deliver on.
Yeah. Cool. And I feel like there's an implicit subconscious promise in the way that it's presented, in the polish and confidence of the performer that puts the audience... Yes, the competence, knowing their intros. Remember at Boom how we would have entire rehearsals dedicated to just running intros for games because
they're so important. That's the most important part of the game.
Yeah.
Without a good intro, there's no game that's going to be fun.
Right.
If the audience has no idea what they're about to see, there's no point in playing the game.
Right. And it's twofold. They need to know the actual rules of the game so that they can find it funny when it pays off,
Hmm.
and understand what's happening. And also, they need to know that they can trust you and that they're taken care of because you're on stage when the lights come up and you're looking at them with poise and you're confidently explaining this and it's fun and it's energetic. And yeah, all of
Yeah.
that stuff was a big takeaway from Boom. Do you have sort of running order tips if in the
Yeah.
realm of like putting together a short form or sketch show or things that aren't just a long form mono scene or
Yes.
montage? Yeah,
Oh,
what are
for
those?
sure, for sure. Yeah. So at Second City, their famous structures, three blackouts up top and a musical number, but the one thing that they don't tell you that you really gotta learn about is the credibility slot, which is like the number two or number three sketch. So you have like a big fun opening. You introduce every single cast member. Every
Mm,
single cast member gets a laugh at the top of the show, no matter what, because the audience needs to learn every single face and how they can identify you later on in the show. And then the credibility scene is the second or third scene. That is the smartest scene you got.
mm,
The smartest scene you got goes there. It's usually actually maybe a relationship scene first, and then the smart scene. And
mm.
the relationship scene gets you engaged. It gets you. These are people. I know this is theater I'm watching, but the credibility scene, the smart scene, is the one that lets the audience feel like, okay, they know exactly what's going on. I can trust them with everything they're going to say from here on out, and that buys you a lot of credit with the audience. That far up top. Of course, I'm always a fan of finishing an act with a musical number and a group cast scene, opening the second act and closing the second act with group energy, a
Yep.
song towards the end, something dirty right before that song. You save your dirty shit for right before there. Nice.
Because you've earned the audience along the
Yeah.
way, and now you can be a little bit naughtier because they trust you and they're your friends and you've gone to
Yeah.
other places with them. Now you can like push the
Yeah.
envelope a little bit.
Your longest segment goes in the second act, midway through, or right before that dirty thing. So you get this long, yeah. So anyway,
No, I mean,
uh,
don't anyway. This
oh,
is
okay,
this is
okay.
what we come to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, my favorite Boom running order would go a musical number up top, a relationship scene, a credibility scene, blackout, um, maybe just some other filler stuff, whatever's good but doesn't really, make sure everybody can come back out again. I think everybody want to get everybody another solid turn before intermission, and then a musical game to finish the
Mm-hmm.
first act.
Mm-hmm.
A Or a musical game at the top of the second act. One of those two is either a musical number or a game. You can switch that out. New
Yeah.
segment after that. Blackout. A longer free-form improv set. So questions or just a little more montagey, just a little more open, fun improv for the improvisers to have fun and show off their skill set.
For the
Then,
audience listening, questions was a game where it's like it's basically just open scenes, and each
mhm,
one when you edit the scene, so it's like a two-person scene inspired by
yeah,
suggestion. You edit the scene and you ask the audience a question. My parents met in a diner. Where did your parents actually meet? And then they would say it, and now that inspires the new scene.
my
And then you
greatest contribution to Boom history.
was what was
Questions.
questions? Oh
Yeah,
wow, great.
I think so.
What I loved about that, it's so simple, but I love that style of suggestion getting, especially with that audience where they were from all over the world. Half of them were English as a second language. Most
Hmm.
of them had never seen improv before. And to have rather than say, what's a location? Saying, my parents met here. Where did your parents actually meet? They don't
Hmm.
have to do too much creative work.
Right.
There's no pause, and sometimes just the answer is funny where they're
Yeah.
like, outside of a car crash, and it's like, oh my god, and you know that they're giving the actual answer, but now you have that. Yeah.
My
um
favorite is my grandfather's a dentist. What did your grandfather do for a living? Because no one's going to tell you that their grandfather's a proctologist or a hooker. No
right,
one wants to lie about their grandparents.
right.
So you're
And
gonna get an interesting occupation no matter what.
he's an umbrella salesman.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank
Yeah.
you. It's the best one
Right.
I've heard in years.
Yeah. But yeah, that's I learned quickly at Boom that asking someone what's the best gift you've ever gotten or what's your favorite movie elicits a long silence because people are
Yep.
going, well,
What's your greatest fear?
yeah,
That's something I want to shout that out in a crowd of strangers. What's my greatest fear?
yeah, and
That's the stupidest one.
anything that's a superlative, the best, the worst, the most, the
No.
favorite, because now they're doing the math of like, well, I can think of 6 gifts, but now I have to decide which my favorite one was versus what's the last date you went on or whatever,
I just want a
just
fact.
yeah, give me the fact. Anyway, I wanted to pause and say that, but
That's
yeah,
fine.
that's fine. So like an open scene game like questions or like a
Yep.
montage, then now we're starting to ramp up towards the end of the show, right?
Yep.
There was
That's when I'm gonna
usually like,
throw my dirtiest sketch.
yep, and then usually like
Blackout.
a guessing game, right?
Guessing game is after that blackout. So the guessing game, yeah. Was it guessing game? Yeah. Long thing, dirty blackout, long guessing game, close the
And then
show, and then the final song.
musical number, yeah, yo,
Yep.
here we go, or whatever, yeah.
Yep.
And I remember specifically for the all improv running orders, like Heineken Late Night or whatever, like where it's all short form games and no
Mm-hmm.
sketches.
Mm-hmm.
We pretty much always started with word at a time story because
Word
it's like
time story is so brilliant. It teaches the audience what improv is in the fastest way possible without having to explain anything to them other than one word at a time.
yep,
And if they get that much, you're in the show in a minute or two.
it's
And then after
instant.
that, I'd follow it up with shift left, shift right, which is also a perfect number 2 game because it also teaches them what is improv? You can see any combination. We're gonna have to keep track of a couple different scenes at the same time, and it really educates them and levels up the audience to be an improv audience without, again, too much of a hurdle to get over.
Yeah, right. And to your point of wanting to introduce each cast member, it's like
Mm-hmm.
within those first couple of games, we want everyone to be featured a little bit so that the audience knows what each person in the band does, and like what
Exactly.
they're familiar. So now when they
Mm-hmm.
do other stuff, they can make bigger choices or whatever because we're
Yep.
all family. Yeah,
And then the final thing I would tell
Francis.
Francis, thank you,
Yeah.
is tight or interesting transitions in between, whether you're doing short form or you're doing a sketch show. Having, if you're not going to do an exposed transition with choreography to get from one scene to the next, make that blackout as quick as possible, quick as humanly possible. And practicing, that's the best thing I ever learned from Second City's Tops and Bottoms, is practicing over and over again how you're going to get from one scene to the next with chair sets and tech. We would spend an hour of rehearsal. Probably got down to about half an hour in Green Co rehearsals of just talking through the chair sets and giving ourselves little running orders so everybody was clear before every single show. And it helps so much. It helps the pace so much.
Yeah, I mean, a slow pace is death to comedy, and especially, you're gonna live and die in those transitions between scenes because slow pace in a scene is death to comedy, but between a scene where
Oh
nothing
my
is
God.
happening, good
You've earned
Lord.
all this capital of a great sketch, and then I gotta wait 2 minutes in the black for someone to bring a table on and off. No,
Yeah.
thank you. You've just wasted all the poker chips.
You've wasted all the poker chips. I just had a long conversation with Beck Drysdale about this, and I think that her episode is going to air before yours, so I'll
Oh
spare
boy.
the audience the same thing. But
Shoot.
yes, tops and bottoms, transitions. I think another thing that bears leaning on a little bit for Francis's question is like, remember that an audience that's new to improv, you can start really simple and really like. I've even noticed it in long form shows, like when we tour and do these Ben Schwartz shows. Like half the audience has never seen improv before or long form, and the most success happens when we start very simple and very direct from
A
the
to
from
A.
the monologue in those first scenes. The times where I've tried to be clever and go A to C or go analogous, and I'm like, oh, Got it. So it was like a really, she had an overbearing mom. So I'm going to be like an overbearing flight attendant. And like people don't get it until they know what it is you're doing and that you
Yep.
are taking stuff from the monologue. Once they understand that, 3 scenes in, now you can start tiptoeing towards more clever pulls and more clever spins on things. Um,
A
yeah.
to C is for a audience full of improvisers. A to C, I think I developed because A to A wasn't working, A to B wasn't working because no one was laughing at A to A and A to B anymore because we were just doing improv for other improvisers and we saw it coming. But yeah, you're right. I'm very of the mindset. Like I was listening to your interview with Canale, uh, and he was very antagonistic against the audience, like
Mm-hmm.
kind of like provoking the audience, trying to dare the audience. And I love Joe Canale. He's one of my closest friends, but I'm the exact opposite when it comes to an audience.
Same.
I feel so much for the couple that paid a babysitter and arranged this and came into town and spent money instead of going to a movie, instead of going to dinner, they came to a show. And
Mm-hmm.
I really, really want to take care of them. Uh, and that's really why I like doing what I'm doing because I really love entertaining those folks that really need a fucking break from the world.
A hundred
Um,
percent.
and to have them experience something where they're not being taken care of or talked over or improvised over
Mm-hmm.
and not really being given a show. I
Mm-hmm.
hate those moments. So I am very much a fan of A to A for an audience that has never seen improv. Like,
Yeah, and it really also honors their suggestion and shows them that it is improvised. I
yeah,
think, like, in Harold's, we like for especially at UCB where it's 100% improvisers in the audience. As you said, we're like going A to C to like put a spin on it or to entertain ourselves or whatever, be more clever, find the next thing. But for an audience who doesn't know what improv is, if they shout toothpick and then you never do a scene about a toothpick, they're like, well, what? How do we know
what
that
the
it was
fuck was that? Yeah.
improvised? Yeah, you want them to know it's improvised. You want to honor what they gave you and use it somehow so that the magic trick is complete.
And
Otherwise,
even
you
if
ask them to pick a card and then you never show them their card. They're like, yeah, where was
even if
it?
they say the suggestion is sex or proctologist or whatever it is, take that, turn it into something so much smarter than they were expecting, but at least
Mm-hmm.
honor it. And like that person, it's a democratic art form. Whoever
Yes.
gets to it first shouts it. Let's just take the first suggestion and make it the smartest show we can.
Totally. Man, I remember like my second year at Boom, we hit like a lag, a slump collectively as a cast where we were
Mm.
just burnt out on doing 5,000 scenes where people were like the red light district or
Mm-hmm.
coffee shop or whatever. And we talked about this. Pep was the director at the time, and we're like, it's just such a bummer. We're so uninspired. How do we do this? So we had a rehearsal where he was like, I'm going to give you the most mundane suggestions, and I want you to try to do the most like unusual spin on it, just to see.
Okay.
And my favorite, I only remember one, but it was Tim Sniffen, the genius of the world.
Yeah.
Pep gave him red light district, and he started by like standing in the, like he was a hooker in the booth, standing against the
Mm-hmm.
glass, and people were walking by, and all of a sudden he went, "Help! Help! My booth is filling up with water. And I can't escape." So it's like became this like magic trick booth that was somehow filling with water and he couldn't get out, and we were all like thinking that he was being sexy and we're like debating whether we should buy that one while he slowly drowns. It was very funny. Yeah. So let's reverse a little bit. So
Okay.
Chicago leads to did you do Boom before you did Second City stuff like you were a director at Second City, right?
At the time when I got Boom, I was at IO. I was on a really good troupe, a really good troupe that had just gotten broken up, and I was ADing, assistant to the director, to Mick 40th anniversary
Wow.
review at Second City, and I had just directed a play with Eric Lindbergh and Sarah G. They got really good reviews in the Reader. So I was a
You
little bit
don't
of a
need to
hot
show
shit
off.
back
We
then.
we we respect you. You don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't have to
A little bit of a
brag.
hot shit at the moment. So I had good juju with Mick. I had good juju from this play review. And at that point, I had auditioned for Boom 3 times and I'd gotten
Mm.
called back 3 times. And I was, Ike had just gotten the gig. We were living together and I had to, they called me. Pep called me, or I guess it was Andrew, called me to tell me I didn't get the gig. And I was like, oh, Ike's here too. Do you want to talk to him? And they're like, yeah. So I had to sit there and watch Ike get the gig in front of me. My whole life changing before my eyes. Uh, but this time they were looking for an assistant director. And I was like, oh, I just want to go out there. The only reason I want to act for you is so I can eventually direct. You know what I mean? Like, I'll take a shortcut to directing. Thank you. That sounds great. So I got that gig. I play lobbied for me, and they hired me. They was taking Josie O'Reilly's job, who was the artistic director, and splitting it into two. So they hired Bumper and Jen as actors. Bumper, Carol, and Jen Bills, and then they hired Kay Cannon and myself, and they hired me to do the home shows and Kay to do the away shows. So Kay was now the new corporate show director, and I was the home show
Really?
director. Yeah.
Wow, I never knew that. I thought that she was just went straight up as a cast member.
No,
Um,
she eventually got worked into the cast. After the original idea was that she wouldn't be doing that, but she was too much of a force
she's
to reckon.
yeah, such a talent. Th
Yeah.
This is fascinating. Okay, so you went over then, but
Mm-hmm.
as an
Assistant
assistant
director.
director.
But Josie knew she was quitting, so she quit like she left 2 months later. So I was the assistant to nobody for like 6 months.
I love that they didn't promote you to director. They just made you assistant to
Yeah,
nobody.
assistant to nobody for 6 months. Very humiliating, but I was just doing all the work and learning the job. But it's insane. Brendan Hunt's in the cast, and Bumper was my idol at IO. I'd go every Wednesday to watch Bumper. Now I'm his boss, which is insane to me. Josh Myers in the cast, and Joe Canale was in the cast at the time. Liz Kukowski was in the cast. Um, and so after 6 months, they made me artistic director. Um,
Amazing.
but yeah, and so I kind of learned the job on the fly. I was a pretty good play director, but I'd never done anything like this before,
Hmm.
um, especially at this kind of level. So, but my job was to run rehearsals, watch shows, and they'd bring Rosowski or Ron Weston or Seth to come to help write material, put a show together,
Hmm.
and my job was caretaking it. So I would be their assistant in the rehearsal room and their boss outside of the rehearsal room, um, and running rehearsals and doing running orders every night and deciding
Did
who plays when,
when that
giving
started
notes.
full swing, did you feel in over your head at all, or did it feel like you put your hands
100%.
on Excalibur and it pulled from the stone and you were like, I got this?
No, I did not get this. I had this big learning curve for me. I did not have the right vocabulary. Some of the things I learned from Mick weren't rubbing off the right way. I had to learn running order.
What do you mean you didn't
I,
have the right vocabulary?
oh, like I would tell Bumper that was really dumb what you did in the show last night. And he's like, "Hey, can you not call me dumb?" I was like, "You know what? You're right. I'm gonna stop doing that. I'm gonna take that word out of my vocabulary." Or you know what I mean, like shit like
Yeah.
that. You got to learn, But thank God I had people who would, let me know when I was screwing up. You know, um, it was hard. They were funnier than I was by far. I was
Mm,
definitely the 13th man on that team.
mm.
Andrew being the 14th. Uh,
There's that famous, someone told me this roast joke, like, where someone was like, was it you getting roasted
yeah,
as you were leaving? And Andrew was like, you're the 13th funniest man at Boom Chicago. And you went, spoken like a true 14.
yeah. I was the first roast. They
Oh,
surprise
wow.
roasted me. I didn't know I was being roasted when I left.
Oh,
They
no.
They did it after late night, and by sheer happenstance, a bunch of my fraternity brothers were in the audience that night, um, and they saw me getting roasted. And it was a surprise roast. I did not know this was happening, and I
Uh,
was given no time to prepare, so I had to improvise my rebuttal that night.
I mean,
which
that rebuttal is so good that it lives in my brain, and I wasn't even
thanks.
there. Spoken like a true 14.
But yeah, it was great. And going back to Chicago and New York eventually to recruit people like Becky and Jordan and Sudeikis and
Beck Drysdale, Jordan Peele, yeah,
yeah, Randall
Jason Sudeikis.
Lauren, Joe Kelly. It was just a murderer's row, and I get to pick, people who I thought were brilliant and bring them over and
I
be
have
their
to
friend and
say,
boss.
yeah, like I auditioned the year after you hired Beck and Jordan. I
Hmm.
auditioned while you were still AD, and you shortlisted me, and it was like the biggest honor of my life. Like you're like you don't have the job, but if anyone quits, you're like on the short
I wanted to
list
work with you
of.
so bad. The minute I saw you improvise, you're like, that girl's got it.
That's so wild to hear now because I still feel like I'm learning how to improvise, and back then I must have been just so green. But it having your belief in me, I think changed the course of my life, truly.
Mm.
You know how you just like you need like a champion to like
Yeah.
to say like I get you and you're funny and keep going and like it's not here yet but it will be and I believe in you. Like you were the first of those voices in my adult career life, and it's like it's a big deal.
Well, I love you, and I think you're
I
one of the
love you
funniest
too.
people I ever met. And I think 60% of my job is just keeping people on that path and saying, "Hey, don't
Mm.
quit. You got this. Here's what's funny about you. Here's what you can like get better at." And doing it in a place that makes them want to kind of keep doing it.
You're like the
I think,
comedy guidance counselor.
yeah, sure, I'll take
I,
that.
I,
With
you know,
pride, I take that.
yeah, but I really mean like when I really meant it when I said that this is something that's in your DNA. You talking about being a kid and noticing a random guy on Three's Company and being like, that guy's got it. It's like that's some, you know what I mean? That's some ingredient in you where you can recognize talent even if it's being outshone by shinier diamonds. You're
Oh, for
like, ooh,
sure.
but that one, ooh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. And that is a skill, and it's a skill of like aggressive humility and generosity. That you're not chasing your own fame. Your
Mm.
success comes from uplifting other people and like throwing the rope down for them and
Oh
hoisting them.
yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I mean, very few people threw the rope down for me.
mm,
Um, I'd say Pete Rose definitely threw the rope down for me. Ike for sure. Um, Jill, Benjamin too. People that really like looked out for me and tried to like pull me, and not many other people did. But my life's work is throwing as many ropes down as possible because I want an army of comedians to kind of end this fascism. You
I
know what
mean,
I mean?
Dave, I literally think about the world in those terms. Like, I've been
Me too.
traveling to teach a lot, and especially internationally, and I truly frame it in my mind like I am training an army of comedians to help heal the world and bring voice to every
Hmm.
corner. And it really is that. Like, yeah, I mean, we could spend 2 hours just talking about that, but yeah, I think it is remarkable and needs to be applauded that your personal character is one of like, despite the fact that you are also a funny improviser and a successful performer and you own and run your own theater, your focus is constantly on putting the magnifying glass out to find who else might be there, build a
Hmm.
bridge for them, nurture them, encourage them. There's just so much kindness and light in that, and I wanna hug you for that
Oh,
publicly.
thank you. I'll
Yeah,
take it. I'll take a
yeah.
hug.
For part 2 of this episode, go to yesalso.supercast.com. If you like this podcast, you can support us and get a ton of bonus content over at yesalso.supercast.com. If you have a question about improv that you'd like us to answer in episodes, send it on over to yesalsopod@gmail. Remember to follow us on Instagram at yesalsopod and keep sharing us with your improv communities. We love the love. If you're a theater who would like to host us for a live recording and improv show, let us know at yesalsopod@gmail.com. A huge shout out to Ryan Rosenberg, who produced this thing with his generous help and his unlimited knowledge about all things podcast. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week. No, we won't, Susie. That's not how podcasts work. They will see. They won't even see us. They will listen to us. So it's actually the opposite of both things you said. Thanks for listening, and you will listen to us next week. Maybe. We don't know.